He fought off an armed robber, took a bullet to the elbow, and watched his girlfriend pull the trigger to save their family. By every measure, BTB Savage should have died that February night in his own apartment. Instead, he walked away and made the decision to tell the world exactly how he survived. But surviving a gunfight is one thing. Surviving the consequences of talking about it publicly was an entirely different battle, one he wouldn't win. This is the tragic story of the Ohio rapper BTB Savage. Before rap ever entered the picture, BTB Savage, born Daryl Gentry, was moving down a completely different path. He was an honor student, the kind of kid people expected to succeed no matter what lane he chose. He also spent 4 years in the military, serving overseas in Korea. And funny enough, it was during that deployment that rap first grabbed his attention. What started as a way to pass time eventually turned into a real passion, and before long, he knew music was what he wanted to chase. His mother, Ward, never saw it coming. When Gentry first told her he had made a song, she was caught completely off guard. In her mind, music wasn't something he had ever seriously talked about before. But what seemed random to everyone else was something he had already committed himself to behind the scenes. Once he made up his mind, he didn't play around. He linked up with engineer Duvin and released his first single, Marilyn Manson. Not long after, he followed it up with Break the Bank. The momentum started building, and eventually he connected with Three Kin. Together, they dropped a mixtape called Scam Party, which pulled in roughly 50,000 views within just 3 weeks. For an independent artist still trying to make a name for himself, that was a major sign that things were moving in the right direction. By early 2023, Gentry decided it was time for an even bigger move. He packed up and relocated to Houston, putting himself closer to his manager and producer. According to his girlfriend, he was completely focused on turning music into a full-time career. Every move he was making was about leveling up. Houston wasn't just a change of scenery, it was supposed to be the next chapter. But just days into February, everything changed. On February 4th, 2023, San Antonio police rushed to Gentry's downtown apartment after multiple 911 calls reported gunfire. The apartment was home to Gentry, his girlfriend, and their infant child. When officers arrived, the scene was pure chaos. Witnesses described people running through the hallways, screaming that someone had tried to kill them. Inside the building, investigators found a trail of blood leading directly to Gentry's apartment door. Following that trail, they entered the residence and discovered a man named Omar Richardson lying face down in a pool of blood. He was pronounced dead at the scene. As detectives worked through the evidence, a picture started coming together. What began as a planned music collaboration had reportedly spiraled into something far more dangerous. Authorities concluded that Richardson had attempted to rob Gentry and his girlfriend inside their own home. A violent struggle followed, and during the confrontation, Gentry's girlfriend fired multiple shots to protect her family. After reviewing the case, the San Antonio Police Department ruled the shooting a clear case of justifiable homicide and officially closed the investigation. Then, about a month later, the story exploded into the public spotlight. On March 26th, VLAD TV released a nearly 30-minute interview with BTB Savage. The interview quickly gained traction, eventually pulling in more than 1 million views. During the sit-down, Savage walked viewers through the terrifying events that led up to that night. According to him, it all started with a rapper who had been repeatedly asking for a feature. The request kept coming until finally, on Friday, February 3rd, the artist claimed he was ready to pay cash and wanted to record immediately. The plan was to handle the song at Savage's house and then begin shooting promotional content right away. There was just one problem. The request came late at night, somewhere between 10 and 11 p.m. Savage wasn't comfortable with it. Doing business at a private residence that late already felt questionable. Sitting with his girlfriend, he debated whether it was worth it. Part of him wanted to wait until the next day and meet in a proper studio, but another part of him saw an opportunity to get paid and knock out the record in one shot. Eventually, he agreed. In his mind, it would be simple. The artist would pull up, hand over the money, record the track, and everybody would leave. What he didn't realize was that several warning signs had already started appearing. Looking back, Savage admitted there was one thing that should have stood out immediately. Every concern he raised, the artist seemed to have an answer ready for. When Savage explained he didn't even have studio equipment at the house, they quickly responded that they would bring their own setup. At the time, that sounded reasonable, so the meeting stayed on. When the artist finally arrived, he wasn't alone. There were several other people in the vehicle. That didn't seem unusual either. Plenty of artists travel with friends, security, or members of their team. Savage welcomed them inside, but almost immediately, something felt off. Instead of acting like people focused on making music, several members of the group seemed more interested in scanning the house. Their eyes wandered from room to room, taking in every detail. It was strange, but not strange enough for Savage to shut everything down. Then another red flag appeared. The crew brought in a studio box and began setting up equipment, making everything look like a normal recording session. A few moments later, they suddenly claimed some of the gear had been left in the car. That's when the artist's uncle told the rapper to go outside and grab it. And that was the moment Savage's instincts kicked in. Something about the situation didn't make sense. If the artist was the guest and the reason everyone was there, why was he the one being sent outside? Why wasn't the uncle going instead? The more he thought about it, the less it added up. The second the artist stepped out, Savage locked the door behind him. Now the artist was outside along with the rest of the crew. Inside the house, only 3 people remained: Savage, his girlfriend, and the uncle. And that's when the situation took a deadly turn. Trying to keep things calm, the uncle pulled out the money for the feature. Seeing the cash made everything feel normal again. Savage relaxed a little. Maybe he had been overthinking things. The conversation shifted to jewelry. The uncle started asking questions about Savage's chains, wanting to know where he got them and how much they cost. Thinking it was harmless small talk, Savage began showing them off. As he looked down at one of the pieces and explained the money he had spent on it, his attention drifted away for just a second. That single moment was all it took. The uncle suddenly pulled a gun and demanded the jewelry. BTB Savage was exactly where they wanted him. The older man stared him down and made it crystal clear what was happening. Hand over everything, or he and his girlfriend were going to die. At that point, Savage knew he couldn't panic. He couldn't make any sudden moves, so he played along. At least, that's what it looked like. The moment the man stepped forward to snatch the chain off his neck, Savage exploded into action. He wrapped up the man's arms, locked him up, and drove him straight to the floor. Just like that, the whole situation flipped. As they crashed to the ground, the gun flew out of the man's hand and skidded across the room. Now it wasn't about jewelry anymore. It wasn't about money. It was a straight-up fight for survival. While struggling to keep the man pinned down, Savage desperately motioned for his girlfriend to grab the weapon. She didn't freeze. She didn't hesitate. She picked up the gun and fired 2 shots into his back. But instead of ending the fight, it seemed to make things worse. The man was running on pure adrenaline now. Despite being shot, he somehow managed to pull out a second firearm that had been hidden on him the entire time. Suddenly, a laser beam cut through the room and landed directly on Savage's girlfriend. The man squeezed off 2 shots in her direction. Thankfully, both missed. Savage immediately threw himself back into the struggle, doing everything he could to keep the gunman away from her. Then reality hit him even harder. In the middle of all the screaming, gunfire, and chaos, he remembered his young son was asleep in the next room. Everything changed in that moment. Now it wasn't just about protecting himself or his girlfriend. His child was only a few feet away from a deadly gun battle. From that point forward, Savage was doing everything he could to get the attacker out of the house and away from his family. But the man still wasn't ready to quit. Realizing he was losing control of the situation, he started yelling for the people outside to shoot through the door, and that's exactly what they did. Bullets started tearing through the entrance. By some miracle, nobody inside was hit. Savage yelled for his girlfriend to finish the fight, but more rounds kept ripping through the doorway. She couldn't safely get close enough. Instead, she fired back toward the door. That alone was enough to send the attackers outside running. Now the house had gone strangely quiet. The crew outside was gone. Only the gunman remained. Savage once again signaled to his girlfriend to end it. She pulled the trigger, but in the confusion, the shot missed his target and struck Savage in the elbow instead. The injury was devastating. His arm was shattered. Even through the pain, Savage repositioned himself, giving her a clearer shot. This time, she connected. Another bullet hit the attacker. But somehow, the fight still wasn't over. The man refused to stay down. Determined to finish what he started, he began crawling across the floor toward the firearm that had fallen earlier. Savage saw exactly what he was trying to do. The second the man reached for the weapon, Savage reacted first and emptied the remaining rounds into him. Only then did the nightmare finally end. Looking back later, Gentry admitted that neither he nor his girlfriend had ever experienced anything like that before. They weren't seasoned shooters. They weren't trained for that kind of situation. They were simply trying to survive. Once the danger had passed, the family got out of the apartment and rushed to the hospital. Savage's arm was in terrible shape. According to him, the injury was so severe that bone was visible through the wound. Meanwhile, the wounded attacker was still lying inside the apartment. According to Savage, the man begged for help, pleading to be taken to the hospital. He reportedly talked about his own children and begged for a chance to make it home alive. But after everything that had happened, Savage wasn't interested in helping the man who had just tried to kill his family. Instead, he focused on getting his loved ones to safety. Even amid all the bloodshed and confusion, one thing stayed at the front of his mind, making sure his son didn't have to witness the horrific scene unfolding inside that apartment. A friend eventually drove the family to the hospital where Savage received treatment for his injuries. Later, during his interview with Vlad TV, the conversation shifted to the artist who had originally arranged the feature. Many believe that artists may have played a role in setting everything up and could have even been among the people firing through the door. But Savage largely brushed the subject aside, claiming he barely knew the man and couldn't even confidently identify him. The interview eventually moved to a different topic: the emotional weight of taking someone's life in self-defense. A lot of people assume that kind of experience stays with someone forever. Savage didn't see it that way. From his perspective, he was alive, his family was alive, and that's what mattered. His arm was badly damaged, but he had survived. When asked whether he feared retaliation, he acknowledged that possibility without sounding particularly concerned. The dead man had relatives, friends, people who might want revenge. But Savage made it clear that if that day came, he believed he would handle it. Behind the scenes, though, some of the people closest to him were worried. According to Georgia rapper Junie Knotts, Savage struggled with whether he should publicly talk about the shooting. Friends urged him to stay quiet. In their eyes, he had survived. He had protected his family. The case had been ruled self-defense. That should have been the end of it, but Savage saw things differently. He reportedly felt that if the robbery had succeeded, the people responsible would have been online celebrating and showing off what they had taken. Because of that mindset, he wanted his side of the story out there. Unfortunately, many of his friends believed that decision was a mistake, and instead of moving on from the incident, Savage leaned into it. He began using the story as part of his public image, turning one of the most violent nights of his life into content. The most controversial moment came when he posted a photo of himself standing in front of the apartment door that had been riddled with bullets. Visible signs of the bloody struggle still remained in the background. The image immediately went viral. Not long after, he doubled down even further by releasing a song tied directly to the incident. From that point on, tensions only grew. According to people close to him, members of the deceased man's family and others connected to the situation began relentlessly taunting him online. Some allegedly promised they would make his family suffer the same pain they were feeling. His mother became so concerned that she begged him to leave Texas altogether and come stay with her in Las Vegas until things cooled down. For a while, it looked like he might actually do it. He was reportedly making plans to go, but as fate would have it, he never got the chance. On March 30th, 2023, the same day he would lose his life, Daryl Gentry, better known as BTB Savage, made a phone call to his mother that would haunt her forever. Something wasn't sitting right with him. According to his mother, he sounded genuinely scared. He told her that people were trying to set him up and that he believed they were planning to kill him. The fear in his voice was impossible to ignore. In fact, from the way he was talking, it seemed like he was standing right beside the very people he suspected were involved. Sadly, his instincts were dead on. Later that evening at around 6:10 p.m., gunfire erupted near the parking garage entrance of an apartment complex on San Felipe Street near Mid Lane in Houston. When officers arrived, they found Gentry suffering from at least one gunshot wound. He was pronounced dead at the scene. As investigators began piecing together the attack, they learned that Gentry had been driving a white Mercedes northbound on Mid Lane when a newer model black Subaru SUV pulled alongside him. Without warning, the occupants allegedly opened fire, unleashing a barrage of bullets into the vehicle. Witnesses told police that immediately after the shooting, two suspects sped away in the black SUV at a high rate of speed, disappearing before officers could arrive. As news of the killing spread, the focus quickly shifted toward finding the people responsible. While investigators launched a massive manhunt, Gentry's mother, Bernita Ward, publicly pleaded for those involved to surrender before more lives were destroyed. To her, Daryl wasn't just BTB Savage the rapper. He was a veteran, a father, a son, and a man who deeply loved his family. The pain in her voice was impossible to miss as she spoke about losing him in such a brutal way. What hurt even more, she said, was learning that while his body was still lying in the street, people were allegedly stealing from his apartment. Ward never wavered in her belief that her son had acted in self-defense during the robbery weeks earlier. At the same time, she admitted she had repeatedly warned him to stop feeding the drama online. She had urged him to delete the posts, stop doing interviews, and allow the other family space to grieve. But by that point, emotions were already boiling over on both sides. According to Ward, people connected to the deceased robbery suspect had been sending threats for weeks. Some allegedly promised they would kill her son, make her cry, and even target his child. Her advice was always the same: don't respond. But the threats never stopped. What makes the story even more heartbreaking is that Ward believes the warning signs were there right up until the final hours of her son's life. She recalled receiving that phone call from him earlier that day. The moment he told her he felt like he was being set up, she immediately told him to leave. According to her account, he listened. He went back, picked up 2 friends, got into his car, and tried to get away. But somewhere along the way, the people hunting him allegedly knew exactly where he was. Ward later claimed that those same friends betrayed him, secretly communicating with the killers and providing live updates about his location, what he was wearing, and the vehicle he was driving. To her, the murder wasn't random. It was retaliation. Looking back on everything that happened, she described it as a cycle of anger and revenge that spiraled completely out of control. Even through her grief, however, she expressed sympathy for the family of the man who died during the robbery attempt. Having now experienced the loss of a child herself, she said she understood the pain they had been carrying. Still, she remained determined to see everyone involved brought to justice. In her eyes, the tragedy was proof that nobody truly won. 2 families had lost sons, and both losses left behind pain that could never be undone. As the investigation intensified, an unexpected break came almost immediately. On the morning after Gentry's murder, police in New Braunfels arrested a man named Montrell Burley on an unrelated drug charge. At the time, authorities didn't yet have enough evidence to connect him to the killing. According to those records, Burley rented a black Subaru Outback with Florida license plates from an Avis location in San Antonio 4 days before Gentry was killed. Surveillance footage reportedly captured the vehicle parked outside Burley's residence in New Braunfels. Then, on March 29th, roughly 26 hours before the murder, license plate readers detected the Subaru traveling east along Interstate 10 through Fayette County. Investigators believe that sometime later that evening, the original Florida plates were removed and replaced with plates stolen from a Kia in Harris County. The alleged switch was designed to hide the vehicle's identity, but according to investigators, it ultimately created an even bigger trail of evidence. In fact, those stolen plates were captured on surveillance systems just minutes after the shooting occurred. Authorities believe the suspects then switched the Florida plates back onto the Subaru before beginning the drive towards San Antonio. But by then, technology was already helping investigators retrace nearly every move. License plate readers continued tracking the vehicle, and roughly an hour and 40 minutes after the murder, cameras spotted the SUV traveling westbound on Interstate 10. Meanwhile, cell phone records allegedly placed Burley's phone near BTB Savage's apartment multiple times before the shooting. Investigators say the device spent approximately 4 hours in the area the night before the murder and another 4 hours nearby during the day leading up to the attack. Taken together, prosecutors believed the digital evidence painted a powerful picture of surveillance and planning long before the first shot was fired. Legal analysts following the case noted that modern investigations rely heavily on technology such as cell phone data, surveillance footage, and automated license plate readers. In this case, authorities appear to have accumulated a substantial amount of digital evidence very early in the investigation, and the trail didn't stop there. Just moments after the shooting, license plate readers captured the rented Subaru heading back towards San Antonio. Houston investigators immediately contacted authorities in New Braunfels and asked them to check Burley's listed address. When officers arrived, they found the Subaru sitting right there in the driveway, exactly where investigators expected it to be. By the very next morning, investigators were already moving fast. Authorities had secured a search warrant for the black Subaru they believed was connected to BTB Savage's murder, and officers from the New Braunfels Police Department, along with their SWAT team, headed to execute it. But before they could make their move, something unexpected happened. The Subaru suddenly pulled away from the residence. Police immediately conducted a traffic stop roughly 100 feet from the home. Inside the vehicle, Montre Burley was sitting in the passenger seat while his fiancée was behind the wheel. According to court records, Burley was arrested on the spot on a drug possession charge. Once the vehicle was seized, detectives from both Houston and New Braunfels began interviewing Burley and his fiancée separately, hoping to figure out exactly where he had been during the hours leading up to the murder. Burley came prepared with a story. According to investigators, he claimed he hadn't even been to Houston for about a week. As for the day of the shooting, he said he slept in and that someone else had borrowed the rental vehicle. But when detectives asked the obvious follow-up question, who borrowed it, he refused to answer. Instead, he immediately ended the interview and requested an attorney. His fiancée, Passion James, gave investigators a different version of events. She confirmed that the Subaru was a rental vehicle from Avis that Burley had obtained after being involved in a car accident. However, her timeline didn't match his. While Burley claimed he was home and simply woke up late, James reportedly told investigators that he wasn't at the house for most of the day and didn't return until later that evening. As detectives continued questioning her, more pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. She revealed that Burley had been close to a man named Omar who had been killed earlier that year. Although she claimed she didn't know Omar's last name, investigators already knew exactly who she was talking about. That Omar was Omar Richardson, the same man who had been killed during the attempted robbery at BTB Savage's apartment. Court records later showed that Burley and Richardson weren't biological relatives, but they reportedly considered each other family and referred to one another as brothers. Then, investigators caught what may have been the biggest break in the entire case. While crime scene technicians processed the Subaru after the traffic stop, a rifle shell casing reportedly fell out from the rear passenger side of the vehicle. That discovery immediately got investigators' attention. After testing, authorities determined the shell casing matched evidence recovered from the River Oaks murder scene. Suddenly, detectives weren't just working with theories anymore. They now had physical evidence allegedly connecting the vehicle directly to the shooting. Even with that breakthrough, prosecutors still needed time to strengthen the case. Investigators spent the next several days reviewing cell phone records, surveillance footage, and vehicle tracking data. Legal experts pointed out that while police may have had strong suspicions early on, they still needed enough evidence to establish probable cause before formally filing murder charges. That evidence eventually came together. According to court documents, investigators confirmed that both Burley's cell phone and the rented Subaru were in the mid-lane area at the exact time BTB Savage was ambushed. The investigation also revealed an extensive level of coordination between law enforcement agencies in Houston, New Braunfels, and San Antonio. As detectives shared information, they uncovered what prosecutors believed was a direct connection between Burley and the earlier robbery attempt that had left Omar Richardson dead. Court filings alleged that Burley and Richardson had deep ties dating back years. Both men were reportedly connected to San Antonio street groups before those affiliations evolved into what investigators described as the Bloodstone Villains, or BSV. Adding even more weight to the case was a statement allegedly provided by Burley's fiancée. According to the probable cause affidavit, she told investigators that Burley had been away from home for most of March 30th. When detectives compared that statement with cell phone records, they were able to create what they believed was a detailed timeline of his movements, and those phone records painted a very specific picture. Investigators determined that on the morning of March 29th, Burley's phone was located in New Braunfels. Later that night, however, the device traveled toward Houston and began appearing near the area where BTB Savage was staying. According to court records, the phone remained in that vicinity throughout much of March 30th. Then came the critical moment. Shortly before the shooting, the device allegedly pinged near the crime scene. Immediately afterward, the phone began moving away from the area. By approximately 11 p.m. that same night, records showed it back near Burley's residence in New Braunfels. To investigators, it looked less like coincidence and more like a roadmap. By April 7th, Houston police officially charged Burley with murder and began publicly seeking his arrest. Just a few days later, on April 11th, authorities announced that he had surrendered and was booked into custody. The court treated the allegations with extreme seriousness. A magistrate judge set Burley's bond at $1 million, say even if he managed to post bail. Strict conditions were put in place, including remaining in Texas and wearing a GPS monitoring device. During the hearing, prosecutors laid out what they believed was the motive behind the killing. According to the state, the murder was retaliation for BTB Savage's involvement in the earlier shooting that left Omar Richardson dead. Because of those allegations, prosecutors pushed to keep Burley behind bars pending trial. They argued that the case involved a deadly weapon and pointed out that he was already a convicted felon. The judge also expressed concern over the allegations, particularly the claim that someone had allegedly traveled a significant distance to carry out an act of revenge. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, speculation exploded across social media. Many fans pointed to a controversial Instagram post made by a rapper known as BJ Goddamn. According to online discussions, the post appeared to mock BTB Savage's death before authorities had even officially identified him as the victim. The post was later deleted, but screenshots quickly spread across the internet. Some users also claimed his clothing matched descriptions circulating online, fueling rumors that he may have been involved. However, those claims remained largely internet speculation, and no public evidence directly tied him to the shooting. The theory that gained the most attention centered on Omar Richardson. Many people believed the murder was ultimately connected to the attempted robbery that ended with Richardson's death weeks earlier. That belief only intensified after individuals claiming ties to Richardson's family reportedly took to social media celebrating BTB Savage's death shortly after news broke. By that point, the entire situation had evolved into a tragic cycle of violence, retaliation, and loss. Looking back, what makes the story so heartbreaking is how much potential seemed to be sitting in front of Darryl Gentry. He had survived a deadly home invasion, built momentum in his music career, and was beginning to gain national attention. But instead of becoming known solely for his music, his name became tied to a chain of events that spiraled into tragedy for multiple families. And when everything was said and done, there were no real winners, only lives lost, families grieving, and a future that never got the chance to fully unfold. Rest in peace, BTB Savage.